construction drawing thing, as long as Liz and the gang are ready to do that. So
Yeah, we should talk about that more. Do you plan to go to that lunch on Friday if you're not tied up with like storm response?
are we on the land manager lunch already?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't have that in my calendar because I feel like we just did that.
I know it feels like it, but I think it's been a month.
No. Do we have a site? We meeting at Dave's house again?
I think so. It says 1404. Yeah, exactly. Well, if not there, we should definitely talk about that.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, Chris. Hey, Tim.
Mr. Anthony is having a hotel check-in problem. He lives in Green. I guess he either doesn't have power or he's just staying close to work. So he's going to join us a bit late. So I'm helping get the meeting started off.
Okay,
But you can run it the way you run it. So just let me know if you need any.
great.
I'll give the update. We'll get the canopy study Friday or Monday. So if you wanted to talk about the state of the forest presentation at that time, or if you want to set it up with Peggy and you and myself later, that's totally fine.
Okay. Yeah, on the canopy study, we could punt that to next month.
Yeah, and the good news is that you get 2 review and comment periods according to the consultant's scope of work. So I can hand it out Friday or Monday and say, in 2 weeks, please send me any questions or concerns or items you'd like them to tweak. And then by the time we do get to a February possible, whatever, it would be even more refined. We would have time to comment on it and ask them some
Okay,
or additional data points or whatever, or graphs and stuff.
so it'd be good to mention that when we get to that during the meeting.
Okay.
Can you just tell me how, and just let the commissioners know how extensive a document this is?
I would guess the documents in the 30 to 40 page range.
Oh,
It's really
okay.
the data sets behind it that can
Yep.
get, that they do PDF maps, but there's a lot of GIS data too, that if you're that kind of person with that kind of software, you can really dig into it in a lot of detail.
Okay, that's doable. So if you can get it to us this week.
Yep.
Um,
I said either Friday or Monday.
that sounds good. Well, one good thing about a snow day, assuming one has power, is that everybody's home. So getting a quorum wasn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be. But I think that may just be the luck of the draw where people live, because when I checked just before around 4 o'clock, there were still a considerable number of customers out in both Charlottesville and the county. So looks like we dodged that.
Brian, I mentioned it before you got on. Our intern is also at home, but without power, and she's doing our minutes. So I'm already doing a transcript, live transcript, which will be a text file.
Okay.
If we want to record the meeting, I think the etiquette is to allow all the members to show up and say, is everybody cool with me recording this? And then I can hit record.
Yep, we can do that.
Okay. And I forget what your quorum total is for people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Well, right now, without an urban forester, we're at 12, so 7 gives us.
Okay.
And I believe we're actually going to be 9 or 10.
Wonderful.
There is a question offline. This would be for communications. I think Peggy Van Yeris is phoned in since she doesn't have power. Can you tell if she's connected, because she's not sure and she's not, and it seems to say she's muted and she won't be able to participate in the discussion.
Looking, let's see, participants, my participant window.
If you
A
know
lot
her
of times it would
number,
show a phone number, but I don't see a phone number right now.
I see 2 phone-in listeners in the attendees. If you know her phone number and can put it in the chat, I can promote her to panelist. But I don't want to say the phone number over a live stream.
Sure. I somewhere have her phone number. How come I can't find her phone number? So she can hear this. So Peggy, this is a roundabout way of doing it. Okay, she just sent me her phone number. So who do I send her phone number to? Sorry to be dense.
Could you put in the chat to me, Lasheen Parks?
Okay. And while I'm doing this, if there are any other commissioners who've dialed in a similar situation, please let me know so we can get you connected. There may only be one other commissioner. There's Peggy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good.
Great.
Are you there?
We may be joined by one more person, one more commissioner. But we are good to go. I want to thank everybody for making time in their snow removal effort to attend this meeting. I will call the January meeting of the Charlottesville Tree Commission to order. First order of business, several items to do with minutes. The first item is the November minutes, which, as you know from the last meeting, I explained slipped through the gap in the transition with Mike leaving. And I was to take a rough draft and get that to you. Well, in the spirit of the dog ate my homework again, I didn't get to that before the holidays, so I definitely will do that. There will be a final record of the November minutes. Send it out to you before the next meeting, so we'll definitely get those into the public record. For the December minutes, which went out in the packet last week, I want to thank Paige for stepping in and Chris today, who will be doing a recording, explain in a minute, but there's a lot, especially when you're new to a group, and there's certainly a lot to catch up on. So those minutes went out last week before the holiday. I myself looked at them very, very cursorily. What we'll do is look at them, especially go through them a little bit more, because I know a couple of you have raised some questions, either substantively or perhaps where there's a little misunderstanding and some gaps, and just also inform. So again, that's nobody's fault. It's just, you know, with the holidays and everything, new people joining us, but we'll definitely take those minutes and give them another look through and work through. I know Mark Rylander raised a few and has offered to shepherd that for us. So if you have, I don't want to go through them at this moment, but if you have any questions, comments, edits, if you would please send them to Mark Rylander, and he will sort of compile that and prepare us a clean copy. Well, I will do the same for the November minutes, so that when we gather in January, we will have 3 sets of minutes to look at. As for this evening's minutes, Chris has a proposal that he'd like to clear with the commission. Chris?
Oh, the page is out of power. I think she's listening on the phone maybe. So There is a live transcript option, so I'm gonna have this live transcript running the whole time for a text file, and I'll also hit record if that's okay with anybody. So I guess raise your hand if you don't support being recorded on this meeting. Otherwise, we'll start the recording in a second.
Chris, Brian, I'm sorry, I can't raise my hand. But Chris, I think that's a good idea that all of them ours always be recorded. Then that makes it easier for somebody doing the minutes, to go back and check.
Right. We just, I think as a Zoom etiquette in a public meeting, you have to announce that you're recording it. So everybody's.
Right. But I was
Right.
just thinking going
Yeah.
forward, even if we meet in person, it might be a good idea to
Oh, yeah.
record.
Yeah.
I know a lot of, it just makes it easier for the person doing the minutes to be able to check things.
Good idea. And they have software that translates voice to text on the spot. So yeah, we could look into that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
with that, I'll hit record. Just
Okay,
ask the hosts. So whoever's hosting has to give me permission, or the host can record.
I was going to say that this is being recorded to our Boxcast stream, so I can send you the link afterwards, so you don't have to take up room on your computer recording it.
Perfect.
So I can do that.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem. I'll shoot it over to you as soon as it finished. It'll probably be tomorrow morning because it takes a bit for it to transcribe. But I'll send it to you tomorrow morning. You can have the entire recording.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
No problem.
And I believe we had to opt in when we joined the Zoom meeting. So I think everybody was aware that we were being recorded. And then you can actually follow it in the bottom. There's a live transcript CC. So you can actually see the transcript as it scrolls. Anybody's interested.
maybe we should keep meeting on Zoom forever. It's so convenient. I'm kidding. I'm kidding completely. Okay, so we've got that. We're set up. We're going ahead with the transcript and the minutes for tonight's meeting. Next order of business, considering the unpleasantness we've had the last 24 hours, it's nice to have something pleasant to talk about. Last month, we welcomed the new deputy director, and tonight we welcome the new director for Parks and Rec, Dana Kassler. And please afterwards correct me if I didn't get that correct, but he has over 25 years of experience in Parks and Rec administration. He comes to us most recently from Louisville, Kentucky, where he oversaw a park system of more than 14,000 acres of parks. I think we decided last month that Charlottesville is about 7,000 acres and change total. And that's not parks, that's all of Charlottesville. So a difference. Natural areas, golf courses, and aquatic facilities. So quite a range of responsibilities and facilities and resources. Now, Louisville, of course, is a bit larger than Charlottesville, but every locale has its challenges and opportunities, and good leadership is essential. So I know I can speak on behalf of the Tree Commission that we are delighted to have a whole team of new leadership, and soon, before long, I guess we'll get an update by the end of this month. We'll also have a new urban forester. So this is a really exciting time. I want to welcome Dana and say that we look forward to working with him, Rianne, the whole Parks and Recreation staff to address Charlottesville's challenges and opportunities, but especially, as we say again and again in these meetings and in advocating to the public, the critical needs of our green infrastructure, climate sustainability, and environmental justice and equity, all huge social issues that we really need a full team in place to make an effort on. So we're really happy to have that. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to him for any words he'd like to share with us.
Sure, thanks so much. And thank you for the welcome. It's been a crazy start. I started on December 20th, right before Christmas. And funny, I was speaking with the new public works director today. And I said, we literally started in a storm. So we couldn't even make it up or say it was about something else. So I do have to say, I'm really proud of the parks team. They have been decimated, as we all have, right, by COVID-related absences. And they've acted swiftly, and Rion and his team have done a great job, the best of their abilities, to remove all the tree branches and things that have fell. And unfortunately, we'll see the impact of that long term. as we're all aware. But just first want to thank him and his team, as well as all the other parks team members that I've met so far. They truly seem passionate about what they do, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted to be here in Charlottesville is when I met the folks, the team members, as well as the community members in the interview process. To me, it's about the passion for what you do, and doing it for 25 years, you better like it or do something else. So excited to be here in Charlottesville. One of the biggest things we were introducing in Louisville upon my exit, we had recently in the last year and a half taken on the urban tree canopy in addition to our parks. So we really were becoming one unit. Whereas before they were divided, they were in a different section. And it was really a divided thing. Whereas we were planting 1,000 trees a year in our parks, they were planting 200 in the urban corridor. Last year we changed that and did a matching 1,000 in the urban corridor as well. So I see the impact. We see the emphasis that needs from an equity standpoint, as well as looking in those neighborhoods that might need that assistance and that urban heat canopy that we need to all worry about. So certainly will be our priority of mine. And again, thanks Chris, thanks Rian for introductions and where we've come to this point. And I'm excited to really get started with this, and certainly can answer any questions you got.
Sure. Well, we can assure you that we didn't dial up the storm for you. But it is a way to be welcomed to town. Anybody else have any words to share or questions? I think we have, I know those of you who participated in the interview process, that would be Mark Rylander and Peggy, obviously had a good bit of information. But I think it would be good for the commission to have, and this applies to Rihanna as well, if at some point, and I'll work with Rihanna on this, if we could have a little bit more background information for our files and perhaps even whatever materials you provided in terms of resume or CV. I think the commission would be interested in, hearing more. So if we could make a note of that and just get that into the record, that'd be good.
Brian, can I?
Go ahead if you like, Peggy.
Well, I'm sorry. Again, I have to tell everybody, I guess you can see I can't raise my hand, so I have to butt in. I'm sorry. But Dana, I was on the interview committee and very impressed with you, and thank you for coming here. Listening to your words about trees, I'm just salivating because you planted 2,000 trees, so we've got to meet that goal. That's crazy. We really appreciate that, and I'm glad you talk about heat islands. And a little bit later, we'll talk about a new project we started called Relief, spelled R-E-L-E-A-F, Seville. So we'll explain that to you and then hope to meet with you soon, and we'll give you more details. But thanks for coming, and we're looking forward to talking to you.
Great, thanks, Peggy. And I'll have to jump off shortly, but I look forward to getting that information from Rian and from Chris.
Mark Rylander?
I really look forward to working with you, Dana, and I was so excited to hear a little bit about Louisville, including the fact that there are Frederick Law Olmsted greenways. So I have a note to myself to study those and look forward to talking to you about that specifically. We're all big fans of street trees here and working hard to try to hang on to what we have and add to it.
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us. I know you're busy, and we look forward to seeing you at future meetings. So thank you. We'll move now to a few items for updates. First is the CIP. So there's a lot to report on the CIP, and in a minute I'm going to turn it over to Jody. He's shocked, as a member of the Planning Commission, and he can give us a little bit more rundown on the public hearing that was held mid-December. I did want to just review for everybody and also to clarify, because this came up, apologies, Jody, I didn't stay around for the entire meeting. I had to go eat dinner. I don't know how you do it, but I had to go eat dinner. And so I did go back and look later that evening at the video. And there were some questions raised by one or two of the members of the commission, Planning Commission, as to the genesis of the requests, the two CIP requests. Was it staff or was it tree commission? To the best of my knowledge, so to refresh for everybody, since we did this back in the summer, in early fall, Parks and Rec submitted two CIP requests. One was for the annual tree planting and one was for dealing with the emerald ash borer. At some point throughout last year, even earlier than probably in the spring, we discussed the issue and Mike came with a plan, which we refined in a couple of meetings for dealing with the emerald ash borer over 5 years. So, and that was largely, I mean, we had a lot of input, but that's largely driven by staff, by Parks and Rec staff, with Mike as lead, and came up with a plan, 5 years, $105,000 a year, for a total of $525,000 in the CIP over 5 years. That was to include the removals and also the continued treatment of approximately 37 trees. I can't recall exactly. So that request really is a joint effort, but really the numbers were developed by Parks and Rec. With regard to tree planting, that $100,000 that was requested for the upcoming fiscal year, and there are other commissioners who can check me on this, but I do believe it's possible that Mike started at the existing 75 and we requested that that be bumped up to 100 to ask for a little more since we were coming off a previous fiscal year of $0. Now, I saw the CIP requests and the narratives, which I had to lightly edit before the day after one of our meetings, I think it was October, and Mike was meeting with Vic Garber and they were doing a final review and then submitting them. It's my understanding that that's how they were submitted, and Jody can correct me on this, that they were submitted as 100,000 for planting and 105,000 for emerald ash borer. That they went to the first reading of Planning Commission, and I believe at that point they were reduced. And so I'll let Jody correct me if I'm wrong on that and sort of take it from there and tell us what happened at the public hearing.
Well, I did attend the whole meeting, and that's why I don't remember much about the the conversation on the CIP relative to tree planting and ash borer. But the upshot is that based upon the presentations, my report, and which preceded the CIP discussion, and then having Peggy and Brian provide public input on the importance of trees. The commission has reversed the recommendations by staff to reduce the amounts and have asked to replace them for the original amounts requested by the Tree Commission and Parks and Rec. So we have asked City Council to provide $105,000 for emerald ash borer treatment and $75,000 for the tree planting. And that's as much as I can remember at this point, and I'm not even positive about those facts.
And then Jody and Brian, if I might, I believe the question about staff and whatnot was that Park staff had submitted their things. It was budget office staff who made the reductions. So
Correct.
that's clear. Park staff did not ask for a reduction. It got filtered at the budget office. And I believe you're right. The Planning Commission recommended that that be reversed.
Correct.
So thank you. This is why I wanted to have this conversation in public, so it clears that up, just so the public understands sort of how we work, and also how we understand how we work with Parks and Rec staff to make recommendations. And sometimes that's a little bit of a back and forth. But my recollection was once we reached the process, the point of submission, that there was consensus amongst all of us here that those were the numbers we wanted to submit. So thank you for clarifying that, Chris. I will say that Jody doesn't Jody, yeah, Jody?
I just wanted to pat Tree Commission on the back for supporting the getting the amounts returned to the proper levels, but also point out that it was really the Planning Commission's was really enthusiastic and felt like this was really important. I think they were very much impressed by the recent reports that we're getting from the canopy study and the reductions, once again, that's happening within the city. And also, this is happening at just the same time that it's becoming more known regarding the health benefits of having appropriate tree canopy within the neighborhoods, especially our 10th and Page and Star Hill neighborhoods that have really fallen below 20% or just at 20% coverage. So it's an item of great importance for the Planning Commission, and that was really encouraging to hear.
Yeah. And Jody raises two follow-on points, one of two follow-on points I wanted to make. The first was, I was there from the beginning of the meeting, and Jody made a very forceful presentation and raised the tree canopy issue. So Jody's always been an advocate. But secondly, it's clear in both the public hearing and in previous planning commission meetings that there's a sense among some on the commission, planning commission, that we need to be doing more on this issue. So you're correct in that. And that from the tree commission's perspective, that feels great, because we feel like there are others within the city who understand the urgency of this, and that we're not alone, along with Parks and Rec staff, pushing for this. So I would also say that I was heartened by the public comment session. In addition to Peggy and myself and Robin Haynes of the Tree Stewards, there were quite a few people commenting on a range of issues. And some of them who were commenting on other issues also raised the issue of trees and green infrastructure. It was clear they were there to talk about something else, and whether it was related or not, whether it was housing or environmental equity, that in their comments, trees came up. And I didn't keep a count, but that seemed to happen in a lot of the comments that were not comments that we had generated for the Tree Commission. So that was a good sign. I think the public gets it. The other thing I think is important for the commission to know is that at least for a good period of that time, of that hearing, some members of council were there. So I can't recall if they were there for the actual public hearing portion of the Planning Commission meeting, but they at least heard that. They had heard that from Jody, and they heard that from staff. So I think there was a lot of good advocacy done that evening, and it shows in the results, because the numbers went from 75,000 tree planting back up to 100, and from 50,000 for the Emerald Ash Borer back up to 105, which is basically, for an evening's work, that's not bad. It's $85,000.
Yes.
My math is right. And it just proves that advocacy and just getting people to stand up for these things doesn't always pay off, but it paid off this time. Peggy made a very nice presentation. I was the grumpy old guy near the end who wanted to get to dinner. So we've sort of played the good cop, bad cop sort of thing. Peggy stressed the positive.
Can I point out that we haven't crossed the finish line yet?
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we haven't won yet. So, which is to say that I would love to see you all make the same kind of pitch during the public hearing for city council when they consider the CIP.
Correct. That's one opportunity. And the second opportunity, that's clearly an opportunity, and that will be good to have numbers for that. So we'll get commissioners in the loop on that process. The other one is the presentation that we will be talking about in a while, but the presentation we make to council each year, which we'll be doing later in January. So clearly in there, we make our requests. And, in retrospect, the tree canopy study came a little late because of a lot of circumstances beyond our control. But on the other hand, it actually kind of fell at a good time in terms of messaging. So I think we're going to continue to use that as a good message to council and to the public as to what we need to do to begin to turn this around. And it's going to be a long, long effort. But again, I want to thank everybody who was involved in that. Are there any questions about the CIP? Yes, Jean?
I didn't have a question so much as I came away fairly depressed after attending that. And I mean, despite the turnaround at the end, which was great, celebration, it gave me, first of all, the staff member there made it quite clear for the next several years, the schools were going to take up a huge amount. There was going to be very little, and it might make it difficult for us to get grants because the city wouldn't have the matching funds because it's all being used for the school changes that are being made that take 75 million. So she kept pointing that out to them. And so that gave me, I started thinking more long-term. And I thought, well, we're going to have tremendous competition for the city money in the coming years. And we have never set a goal of how much we need to start reversing this thing. We start asking for 75,000 or even 100,000, but I don't, at least I might have missed something, but we don't even know what that will do if we get it. And we still don't know if we'll get it because the council has to decide. So I still feel really uneasy and think that, you know, we're competing, and I've seen all the massive PR that's gone on in the community for affordable housing, and we don't have anywhere near that kind of advocacy going on. And you know, that we're going to be in competition. So do we need to think non-city funds and start looking for funds outside of the city, or can we not do that? Can we generate some funds privately or in some other way, going together with environmental groups or whatever?
Well, that is part of the Seagull, really Seagull project. And there's no doubt that funds are going to be tight. I do think that, and Jody can speak better to this, I do think that the Planning Commission, which also has a voice with City Council, besides the staff and finance people, did make it clear that they were uncomfortable with putting all the eggs in one basket and trying to come back and find some of the resources. But those resources to replenish the request for other items, there's no doubt that those resources are going to be short. And you know, I don't want to get into the details. Jody could speak more to this, but there's the whole issue of when the city reaches its, you can't sell bonds anymore, and so even CIP money becomes an issue. So I don't disagree with anything you said. I guess I was just sort of celebrating a short-term victory since we fight for every square inch to climb the hill. In terms of setting a goal, and we just heard it from Dana Kessler. I mean, if we really were planning the number of trees we needed to plant, perhaps we need to be spending $500,000 to $750,000 a year. So, I mean, there are a lot of ways of thinking about it. I think if we set a goal of that, it's great to have that goal, but I don't think in the current climate, we're going to ever see that kind of money. Advocacy is always important. My experience, you know, when I joined the Tree Commission, I've said this to others, I didn't think that anybody was against trees, or I thought people at least were lukewarm, or it wouldn't be a hard sell. I've been surprised over time. It's gotten easier, but I've been surprised over time, not that people are against trees per se, but that they have quite a few more priorities ahead of trees. Now, it is true also that in the short 6 years I've been in the commission, social and environmental pressures have pushed people into thinking more seriously about their priorities. But it's always been, at least the first few years I was on the commission, it's always been a push to get people to really want to focus time and resources on trees. So I don't disagree with you. We can always make a stronger effort, but I think we need to realize that until quite recently, trees and green infrastructure really were not high on the priority list of a lot of people. They said so. I've been to a lot of meetings where people say so at the beginning of a road project, and by the end, everybody's gone. And the trees are gone too, or at least they're largely gone. So everything you said is accurate. I think we need to just keep fighting. And I think in the new year, maybe it is setting that kind of goal, and maybe it's coming up with more of a guerrilla advocacy approach. I mean that in the best sense of the word, like we're really like saying, what do we need to do? I think the tree canopy study, and I think the new numbers, again, I think that this is an opportunity to use that to really sort of make people understand what that means. So I take your points. I wonder if any other commissioners have remarks about that? Peggy, you keep going on and off.
Well, Jean makes a lot of good points, and I think I mentioned to her that we're going to try to join for advocacy. One way to get our message out to other environmental groups is we're going to try to join. I think. Well, we'll need to talk to the Tree Commission about this, but Seville 100, which is a lot of environmental groups. They meet once a month and sort of talk to each other about what they're doing. We were a part of Piedmont Environmental Council's roundtable, which was environmental groups. And again, we met once a month and talked about issues, but that's sort of gone by the wayside, that group. So I think the other environmental group that does advocacy is the Seville 100. I've gotten the names of the two women we can talk to. I've just, with Christmas and storms, haven't been able to do that. And as far as raising money, I mean, that's one reason why we started Relief Seville, because we can raise money through that. We already have. We have over $40,000. And but again, it's mainly for planting on private property, so we have to figure that out. But anyway, I just Jean wanted to respond to you and on those two issues, because you're right about both.
This is Chris real quick. I think that with the tree stewards as well, I do the same thing in the trail world where the Ravenna Trails Foundation can do certain fundraising things and do things on private property, where the city can do certain fundraising and do things on public property. So to everybody's point, I think this will be a community effort. The results of the canopy study are going to give us a kind of what's the split between what the public owned land can do to solve the problem and what the private can do. And that'll help us figure out which groups should be fundraising, because then they can use that money on private land or not private land. So the tree stewards you might want to also connect with and strategize with when this canopy report comes out for future funding. And there's a lot of grants out there. The question is who's going to manage them and which entity ought to apply for them, kind of thing.
So financial strategy, I mean, a goal, perhaps approaching it from what we think the resources are. And even if we have to scale that back when we make budget requests, but put a number out there that's more realistic, at least to start with what we think we can do, even if it's going to get knocked back. And the other two things I'm hearing are alliances, which there are plenty of groups out there. And I know some of you have been working hard to sort of stitch us together. So there's some effort there and some progress. And the other thing is messaging. So again, to my earlier point, if, we went from trees, and trees are landscape and they're nice and they're beautiful and they bring public benefits and they make people, psychologically, those are all valid points. Now we have sustainability and equity and justice. So those are alliances, and I'm not saying they weren't there before, but they're certainly there now. And those are alliances. We should be thinking about those alliances and not just alliances with groups that are nature related. Because again, there were people who spoke at the meeting, at the public hearing 2 weeks ago, who were there to talk about other things, but also linked in green infrastructure. So I think we're missing an opportunity to tie ourselves there. Now, I know we're competing with those, but sometimes, that coopetition or whatever they call it, that sometimes it's actually good to work together. So I think that there's a lot that we can do. And I think that these are all, excellent points. The first hand to go up, I see it, it's a raised hand, is Rian, and then Jody has a hand. Rian?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so as I've been digging through the files of the department, I think Parks and Rec can also do a much better job because we do accept donations. And when I was digging, working with the planning commission on a few questions, I've noticed that Parks and Rec does accept funding for donations for trees, but we don't do a very good job on our website. So I'm busy trying to build something out where there's a donation button for trees and everything. So we have all the infrastructure right now via email and telephone how to accept funding. But I think if we can get it onto our website as well, I think that will also assist us. So it's an easy click of a button. Folks don't have to talk to anybody. They can just donate to the button.
Thanks. That's a great point.
And Gene makes an excellent point that and we cannot depend upon CIP money in the future, within a couple of years. The city governance has made a commitment for school reorganization that's going to essentially take the bonding capacity of the city. All of that money is going to go towards school reorganization, and there will be no money available for other CIP projects in a couple of years. As it stands now, I think council is hoping, depending upon the city populace agreeing to either a sales tax increase or a real estate tax increase, to cover the school reorganization and allow money to be available for CIP. But that is no guarantee, clearly, and you know how contentious that's going to be within the city. So I agree with Gene. We need to start thinking about alternative ways of funding adding trees, of planting trees and taking care of the emerald ash borer, because I'm afraid as things stand now, there's not going to be money for that in a couple of years, for several years.
Jacqueline?
Thanks, Brian. Jody, my question is for you. I was not able to, unfortunately, attend the Planning Commission meeting, but to Gene's point about advocacy, would it be helpful for the tree commissioners to write a quick email to the Planning Commission members, thanking them for the, re-upping the funds? I'm just trying to think, can we make some?
No, that's a waste. That'd be a waste of time.
Okay.
Right now, focus on the city council.
Okay. And the other thing is, Brian, I would be happy to generate a list of 10 organizations, 10 potential alliances for the next meeting. I think that's a great point about probably increasing our reach with some partnerships.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but we have a compelling message. And it's about more than just trees, which we sadly lost many of them yesterday. I'm staring at one right now. I mean, they're beautiful and all that, but they're critical, they're essential. So we have the message. We just have to, there are a lot of pieces to put together, but we need to put those pieces together. Just to follow on to the first question to Jody, but Jody will relate back to the Planning Commission that the Tree Commission appreciates its efforts. That he will do. We'll focus on council.
Yes, that will be in my report for this next Planning Commission.
Excellent. There's a lot here to dig into. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Raise your hand or shout them out. Okay, we will get back to you on the city council hearing on CIP. We're going to defer elect chair and vice chair because it was pointed out to me.
I wrote, I must not have sent it to you. There's too much going on at Marcel's house.
Peggy, you're not on mute. So we're going to defer elect chair and vice chair to the end of the meeting because I was reminded that by custom, the outgoing chair gets stuck with the entire meeting. So I kid, but we'll do that at the end. And so the next item is, and I don't want to take a lot of time on this. I just wanted to introduce this particularly to new commissioners. Each year, we look at our goals, we look at objectives, we take the membership, we look at our committee structure. That is the document that went out with the packet last week. And I think probably the best way to use that, since we'll have new leadership at the end of this meeting, who might want to reach out to individual commissioners, is between now and the next meeting where that will be taken up in detail. And a lot of it comes out of the conversation we've just had, the discussion we've just had. Look at sort of how we're structured and what we're doing in our committees and all that, what we're doing and not doing, and come back with comments or send comments. Some of them we've heard tonight, ways in which we can take that document, which is really a blueprint for what we do for the next year and beyond, and work on that between now and the next meeting, so that at least think about it. So when we get together next time, we can, as a group, walk through that and have a good conversation about that. We have 3 committees. They're not set in the bylaws. We just sort of gravitated in those directions. But if you think that there are ways of reorganizing that, that's great. If you were working in some committee that you think you'd probably be better off somewhere else, then that should be communicated to new leadership before the next meeting, because they'll be making some decisions and assignments. I think we all know that committees have been hard to sustain during the pandemic. We've done a lot of committee work here in this meeting where we're sort of a committee of the whole. And part of that is the public notice, and part of it is coordinating schedules, and part of it is just simply that we already are grateful for the amount of time we get through communications to do this monthly meeting and another slot each month, which would really not accommodate our committees meeting on a regular basis. So we've done it ad hoc, and I think the hope for all of us is that before too long in this new year, we'll actually be moving back to reality, or some reality, and we'll be able to meet more regularly as the committee is used to. So think about, have that in mind too, as you reflect back on the past year or so, but also looking forward as to how this body should meet. We are going to be having membership changes again in the next few months, which I'll talk about shortly, which means new people will be coming on the commission. We are currently, with the exception of the urban forester / city arborist, we're currently at full capacity. The goal should be to continue to have a fully stocked commission, varied interest, backgrounds, et cetera. There's a lot of work to do here. And so I think that's, unless Peggy, you have anything else to say about the goals or objectives, or are there any questions? I think that would be the strategy for how we'll deal with that between now and next meeting.
I think you summarized it well. Yeah.
Okay. So now we'll move on to.
Excuse me, can I ask a
yes.
question?
Jean, yep.
Yeah,
Jean.
could you send me, because I know someone told me once when I first came on what the problem was with the meeting of committees, the rules, these new rules that make it difficult for committees to meet. Could you, at some point in an email, point me in a direction where I can read what those rules are? Because otherwise suggesting changes in the committee structure is not going to do much at those committees. Since I've been on, I'm on one committee and it's only met once, and we didn't really do anything. We didn't do anything in terms of setting up goals, assigning tasks, then following up whether those tasks were done. And so I have a very vague notion of what the committees do, because I just haven't seen a lot of evidence of what they're doing, except for the one that Peggy does with education and advocacy with the relief program, which we've heard a lot about, which is great.
So in brief, there are 2 sets of rules. The first rule in the real world before 18 months ago was that we were required to essentially abide by FOIA and actually announce our committee meetings in case the public wanted to attend. That's always been problematic for us because we don't have meeting space. And oftentimes the meetings of committees happened at people's homes or at a cafe at an hour of the day. So we were struggling with that to begin with. Like, how do we have our committee meetings, which for us are subcommittees because we do a lot during this meeting? How do we have those committee meetings on a regular basis, announce it to the public, have it at a location, perhaps a city meeting space or not? The pandemic came along and changed it because, of course, we were now restricted as to the amount of time we actually actually had. Committees we don't have unlimited amounts of time during the month to meet. We have to, obviously, we're accommodated by the communications department. So these kinds of meetings are actually more difficult, and the time allotted, the time available is much more restricted than under the rules in the real world, which we were also sort of chafing at. But Brian Wheeler had explained this to us when he first came on board, that, and I don't think this was true just of the tree commission, I think it was citywide, that a lot of boards and commissions were having subcommittee meetings or committee meetings, whatever you want to call them, that were not abiding by public disclosure and FOIA. And that was a problem. And so we tried to find a way around that. We were told, no, anytime you're more than 2 people on the commission meeting, you have to notice it and you have to allow the public to attend. So that was true in the real world, and that's true in this world. So I'll go back and look at the notes and sort of put that together, but it's just complicated. I think it gets easier when we move back into the real world because we're not dealing with the limitations on also the demand on staff resources, because we can actually have the meetings ourselves and we don't have to ask others to put us on their schedule to broadcast us. So I think it does definitely get easier then. And as I said, I hope that's soon.
We don't have to meet on city property in city offices or public spaces. We can meet in each other's homes.
Well, that was the
At a
old way of
restaurant.
doing things, or at coffee shops.
Coffee shop.
And we were told that it would be preferable not to do that. And so then we made a request for public meeting space, and then that wasn't always available, and that was difficult. Since we have not the only board and commission, and there are multiple requests. So, I mean, we'll have to go back and revisit all of that in the real world, but it isn't just a matter of the committee deciding they're going to get together and have a committee meeting. It's actually involves other steps. I'm hoping when we go back into the real world that we can get a commitment of available space. If committees say, for example, all committees meet on a Wednesday from 10 to 11 in the morning, and they alternate those weeks. Weeks 2, 3, and 4 are different committees, and room 105A is set aside for them. Like if we can get on that schedule and committee members will go, then I think it makes it a lot easier. I don't think most members wanted to invite the public into their homes. I don't mean that in a nefarious way, but I don't think that was their preference. Like, hey, why don't you just drop in since you didn't know who was coming and it was on a website and suddenly people showed up at your door. So I do think ideally we can work with staff when we exit Zoom world to where we could actually have a schedule of 1 meeting a month. When I first joined, that's the way it was roughly. I mean, I was going to 1 meeting a month for committee. So that really would be the goal to go back to. And I think, you know, Gene, you're correct. I mean, that we need to go back to that system so that we're regularly meeting as committees and generating work for the commission. We're actually generating solutions for the commission. So any other comments on committee meetings, either here or back in the real world? I don't see any hands up. All right, we'll turn it now to staff. We have some updates. I think the first 2 from Rian and then a little bit from Chris on the canopy study. So Rian?
Okay, how are we all doing today? So
Good.
the first, good. So I'll start out with the RFQ for the trees. Finally, there was a little bit delay in procurement, but we do have a viable vendor. The vendor is out of North Carolina, Jeremiah Landscaping. He won the bid. This organization won the bid, and it came in at $70,000.99. So it is high because it's sorry about that. I know I just saw a pop-up there that is very noisy. Unfortunately, I'm homeless right now. I have power for 2 days. So I'm in a lobby trying to get a hotel room. So I do apologize for that. So I'm going to make mine very brief, but we do have a vendor for that. We do have a vendor for that. And Hopefully, I meet with him next week to come up with a timeline, and trees will be planted. So we have $5,000 left in that CIP pot, which I will be using to get a certified arbiter to go around for the RFQ to make sure that the proper plantings have been planted. So that's the update on that one. We advertised the job for the posting. It closed on the 20th. We only have 5 candidates that applied for it. I just sent out an email to all the committee members who wanted to participate in this interview process. I'm planning on having the first virtual interview on January 18th. I invited Peggy because Peggy would want to sit on the panel. Once we do our virtual interview, we will then have a second interview. I'm hoping if the virus kind of plateaus out, that we can bring the individual in for a face-to-face interview. So that's where we are with the interview process.
Rian, is your goal still to, is the department's goal still to have somebody in place by the end of the month, early February?
Again, that is still the goal, but with my new timeline right now, just had to make a bit more changes. So it's the 18th now. From there, it will take me another 2 weeks to get people back in person. So it's going to be probably mostly end of February now. But my goal is still to fill the position because I need someone to manage the trees, because I've only been doing this for roughly around about a month or so. I can tell you I get probably per day roughly around about 5 phone calls and probably 5 emails about trees, dying trees, property issue trees, property trees. So it's a lot of things. I'm working with a contractor, going out there trying to get that, but it's a lot. And as you guys mentioned, you know, especially with the storm, all the ash trees that were diseased, we are finding out they are falling down onto properties, out in parks. They are dropping. So hopefully by the end of this week, I'm sending out a few of our park staff to do an assessment of how many trees got damaged, and I'll probably send you guys that report as well.
Okay. On the interview process, we did submit some general questions from last month's meeting. I would encourage commissioners who have any particular questions that, or just topics that they would hope might get raised during the interview, to send those to Peggy. I know Peggy has her points that she wants to raise, but if there's anything in particular that you think would be important to ask during the interviews. I mean, we did talk a little bit about this last month and revised our questions, but there's another opportunity since there's a little time left. So I'm volunteering Peggy to accept your comments or ideas for questions she might ask. And we'll look forward to having an urban forester here before too long. We understand the challenges, but it'd be good to have somebody permanently in that position. I want to go back very quickly. Are there any other questions about the urban forester? I want to go back to the tree planting just to clarify a couple points. Do any commissioners have questions for Rian on urban forester? On tree planting, I just want to be clear that so the vendor came in with a bid of $70,000 and a few pennies. So that's the money for actually supplying and planting the trees, and then the additional that was left in the budget, the additional $5,000 will be to essentially subcontract with an expert to go out there and for sort of quality control. Is that how the money breaks out?
Yes, so if we had an urban forester, according to the RFQ, it says you have to have a certified arbiter to go behind the contractor to make sure the plants are planted in the right position and the right species. So unfortunately, we do not have a certified officer. So I do have a contractor ready to step in for that role. So that funds will be used to get that RFQ completed as a whole.
Is there anybody out there who wants, who's certified and could say they're an urban forester so we can use the $5,000 for trees? Anybody want to contribute? A few hours of their time? Well,
None of us are certified arborists.
I know. Appreciate the unique circumstances Rian and the rest of staff are facing. But it's just another example of how these times, how the trees keep sort of taking the hit. It'd been nice to have planted $5,000 more worth of trees, but we understand the circumstances and no one's to blame, but we're gonna need to keep raising a lot more private money. I want to back up to that point and just say, I know we've done some of that research in the past. There was a hand up. Wait a minute, there's a question from Mark Rylander. Is this on the tree planting? Before I move ahead, Mark?
Yes. Brian, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So I had to switch computers. Sorry, everyone. And I'm on the phone and on a computer that doesn't have audio. I just wondered if you could, for the benefit of the other commissioners, in past years for tree planting, I guess it's a two-part question. I wondered if we had a record of cost per tree that we track of the cost of the planting, but also, I was under the impression, that the city itself was planting trees. And is that have I sort of missed that, and everyone else gets it, that because of staffing issues, the city can't plant its own trees, or did we never actually plant them ourselves? Did we always subcontract tree planting?
Rian, Chris?
So
It used to be a mix. I think in my earlier years, I believe the Hort team and some others did a certain amount of planting. I haven't paid as close attention recently. I know the contractor's been doing a lot, probably this past year and probably this coming year with short staffness, and Rian can expand on this. I doubt we could do a whole lot. We do the watering. I know that's a big follow-up part that the Hort team follows up and waters all these trees. But yeah, I think it used to be a bit more staff planting, probably less now, but I don't have the numbers each year to quantify that.
Okay, that matches up with, thanks, Chris, with what I'd imagined. Maybe in my early days on the commission there was some planting, but it was I always had the image in my mind that Parks and Rec was planting the trees that we were talking about when we talked about tree planting. But that's all, and I sort of understand we're going forward with a contractor, and I wanted to understand the history of it a bit, and I think that's all I need. Thanks.
Yeah, we've been contracting for at least 10 years on top of whatever we do.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
yeah, so
Oh,
okay, sorry.
no, Rian, do you want to follow on?
Yeah, so there was a combination, but we found out that it's very tasking on staff for planting, and that's why we moved to a CIP project for tree planting. And so this has been going on for up to 10 years, where the majority of the planting is done through a contractor. So we're also running into logistics in terms of maintaining those trees every year by watering them. So just with staff time, we have one dedicated person for the whole summer that just waters plants. So that's what we try to kind of do, a combination of working with those trees. So.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know. Jack?
I just just had a quick question. When we did some tree planting in this neighborhood, in our neighborhood, the vendor and planter of the trees did guarantee, maybe it was just a year. Is there any such guarantee in the current contract?
Yes, there is guarantees. I think it's up to 1 year warranty. So if a plant dies in 1 year, it's up to the vendor to replace that.
Thanks.
Others with comments, questions? So I'm listening to this. I'm going back to Jane's earlier comments, Jody apprising us of what the budget future looks like. And I'm just going to toss this out there, and it's not a request for a response from staff, but I wonder if part of this isn't that, and I know that there are certain strictures as to what differentiates capital and improvement from capital investment from regular budget, but I think maybe we should investigate whether, especially if the pot starts to dry up on the other end, we'll have no choice, but whether this really is something that should be just an assumed annual part of the operating budget. So to Mark's question, we plant trees. That's part of what we do. That's part of what Parks and Rec does, even if it subcontracts some of that labor out or most of that labor out. And treating tree planting as not something that we go and ask for money. And in our case, we're grateful for it, but in the grand scheme of things, it's relatively small amount of money when you look at the CIP. And whether or not that dries up, it might be that we need to be making a stronger argument that this is an annual thing. This is something we don't think about. This is something we do as part of our operating budget. We have to plant trees. And I'm not saying that that's easier and that we're going to get a pot of gold that way, but I think I'm just wondering if we need to think over the coming year or two as to sort of our strategy for what we do for tree planting. And begin now before that pot really does dry up. Or we're really, really struggling with a lot of people with good causes for scraps. And I'm just tossing that out there. It's just, I hadn't thought about that until I was listening to all these strands of thought. Comments, questions, Tim?
Yeah, just that first suggestion, I think that's a great strategy to kind of shift into more of tree planting as part of the Parks and Rec Department's operations. You know, it's more about maintaining the right of way or maintaining park properties, and we could find more success in that direction over time. I think that's a good thing to look at closely.
And I know budgets are fungible, and I mean, I'm not naive as to how these things work, so I'm not saying that it's necessarily easy, but if we think of this in terms of these aren't extraordinary expenses. These are not things that we, sort of put up here and say, we do these every so often, or we do this kind of thing for a period of years. Now, Emerald Ash Borer is a unique thing, and we would never want to deplete the resources of Parks and Rec. So, I understand, and again, I'm not pressing staff on this tonight, so I understand the competition even within a department, but just from strictly and from having heard what Dana said at the beginning of the meeting, coming from, and it can't be the only place where Parks and Rec or similar departments within city and municipal organizations where where they plant a lot of trees, that they don't have a committed line in their budget that is just part of their operating budget. And it may be a non-starter, but I think we should explore
it. Brian, this is Mark again. I think, what would be helpful, maybe we wait till the urban foresters, just so that we're all on the same page about what is actually involved, because, I suspect the reason that you contract this out is because tree planting happens within a certain season, requires some specialized equipment, requires location of utilities. There's a reason that our own tree planting group can't be the ones who are planting these trees, because part of me says, gee, it's not that hard. We've done it ourselves. But, in the public right of way and with liability and the ongoing maintenance that has to happen at the handoff and the warranties and whatnot, it can't be a kind of ad hoc thing. But it would just be good to understand, what it is that's involved, so that all of us could then be able to explain to members of the public why it's done that way. It's like a lot of things. The capital expenditure is a kind of relatively short-term, non-regular expense that often requires, special people and expertise. And, it even actually applies to tree planting in the public right of way. So that's probably the answer, but it would be great to have everyone kind of nodding in agreement about why we're doing it. So that was kind of why I brought up the question.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm not arguing for or against. I mean,
I understand.
When I say we plant trees, I didn't mean literally Parks and Rec people plant trees. But part of Parks and Rec's mission is to plant trees on an ongoing basis. And I just think we message it wrong in a way when we say that this is not an extraordinary expense, but it's something that, could happen for a period of years, but doesn't happen regularly. And again, I'm not saying we take other resources away or we impress members of Parks and Rec and force them to plant trees. I'm not arguing that at all. I'm talking about where the money comes from and what that line item looks like and what the message is to the city.
And to that end, to add to that, Brian, too, I think in terms of where that money comes from, when we talk about private development within the city, there ought to be a very robust budget for replanting streetscapes and or providing green infrastructure. That's part of those development projects. And the city should really push developers in that regard, because that is a significant funding source for doing work like that. And if the city doesn't hold strong on either replacing trees that get taken out and or saying that there's a minimum on trees that are put in as part of a project, those aren't going to happen.
Excellent point.
Very good point. Tim's nodding. In terms of the
Brian?
code rewrites, I wonder if that's an opportunity to sort of put some more teeth into that for zoning.
Yeah, Brian?
Peggy, yep.
Yeah, I think it's, everybody's brought up some interesting points here, and I don't want to steal from Rhiann's operating budget because I'm sure that's tight too. But it does always seem funny to me that CIP is supposed to be not things that reoccur every year, but yet every year we have to go ask for trees. So I think it philosophically is something to think about. It should be just in the budget, not have to be asked for, because we ask for it every year, even though CIP is supposed to be not reoccurring. But the other thing, I think I've told you before, that Richmond gets a lot of money because for tree planting from developers who are allowed to take down public trees. Now, we don't like to take down public trees, but if that happens, if a development is approved, they have to pay into a tree planting fund for that. In other words, the trees are treated as assets, just like sidewalks or telephone poles or whatever. And if you take them down, then you have to pay the value. And that can add up to a tremendous amount of money if it's a big tree, because they look at the DBH and it's an inch for inch. And so sometimes a tree could be worth $50,000, But anyway, I think that's something we ought to look at in our new zoning code. The trees are an asset. If you take them down, the public trees, you need to pay the city for them.
Yep. Definitely. I mean, that issue's come up recently on the mall in terms of improper procedure, replacing trees, the completion of a large project, damage done to a tree by a private citizen. I mean, there's just a lot of ways in which we don't, it goes without saying, we don't treat trees very well, and we also don't make those who privately benefit from a public resource compensate the public. And I think that that's a fundamental issue. I know others have said it, but I think we need to, we need to press really hard, whether it's in the zoning rewrite or in policies and procedures that have allowed some of these things to happen, especially during the pandemic year when people have been overtaxed and not looking in the right direction. And suddenly we see things happening to public trees that are done by private parties. And so to all your points, I think we need to get, we definitely need to get tougher about this. To go back to my point about where the money comes from, I think we also strengthen the message, if we could ever get to this point, where, yes, there are extraordinary times where we need money from CIP, assuming the CIP exists in the future. Emerald Ash Borer, we have a huge potential, well, not potential, we have a not too far in the future beginning of a project to deal with the trees on the mall, which we've been talking about for a long time. I mean, those are things that you would expect would be asks under the CIP. But again, the notion that planting trees is just something we can choose or not to choose to do because we define it a certain way. So anyway, I beat that enough, but I think, and that's, comes from thinking out loud, but I think it's something we should all have in the back of our minds. Chris, did you want to you did a little bit at the beginning before we began the meeting, but did you want to just please update us on where we are with the canopy study and the assignment you're going to be sending out to us?
Spoke with the contractor today. They will have a fact sheet and a presentation to you, I believe she said by Friday, with the full report in its current draft form early next week. There are, in their scope of work, up to 2 rounds of kind of comment, question, tweaking. They have time in their budget to have you guys look at it and other people look at it and say, hey, can you maybe expand on this or present that in a way that's more presentable to the lay people, or those sorts of things, or where did you get this data point? What does it mean? So you guys will all get a copy of that, both the sort of short version of the presentation and the full report within the next week. And then I think Brian and I discussed the kind of homework assignment would be digest that over maybe say 2 weeks, get all your comments and questions back into the system so that we can ask them of the consultant and they can turn that around and provide their feedback on y'all's questions and comments and concerns in a timely manner to begin to have impact where it needs to be had, because this is the kind of data that's going to explain to us who needs to plant trees where and how is it going to happen. So I think as long as people are timely with their review, and we kind of speculated 2 weeks, just depends on how long the report is, how much data is in it. And again, there's a second round. If you miss something in the first round and it occurs to you, there's still time to ask the consultant. I guess they're going to be on board for into February, hypothetically. I don't know the scope particularly, but they're around and there's still budget time to do those things. I'll send that out either through Brian or however we need to do it. And that'll be a homework assignment for mid-January for commissioners.
So I would suggest, given that this is a good opportunity, since this is our report that's going to be around until the next one, 5 years from now, I would suggest that this is the kind of thing that should be routed through the Arbor Committee to at least take point on it. I think that all commissioners should read it. I did ask Chris at the beginning, it's not a 200 or 300 page, it's probably a 30 or 40 page. Obviously, you've already had a preview of the data and at least some of the spreadsheets, but the actual written report, the narrative, is something that we should all look at and provide comments on and send them back through Jeff. So Jeff can sort of collect things, and maybe folks who are doing the Arbor Committee could sort of give it an extra special look in the next couple of weeks. I know we're all busy, but I think it's a good opportunity. And if we could just sort of have that kind of process, I think that would work well. And then get it back to Chris after that. Whatever, we'll figure out what the schedule is, but then get it back to Chris. And so, Chris, you're thinking that that would be like a first round, and then there'd be like a sort of a penultimate draft to look at?
Yes, and then depending on, I don't know if we're going to talk state of the forest tonight, but it could be that you hold off on that second round until you do present this to other bodies and see what kind of questions they have, and maybe some of those questions get directed back to the. So
Yeah.
that might be a good strategy.
We could do that. So, all right, so then Chris, you'll initially address it to Jeff Ayton. Not, we have multiple Jeffs and Jays here, so, and then Jeff, we can coordinate to get that out to the commission and just sort of compile people's comments. Give it a good read. I don't want to stress the obvious, but we paid good money for a good report. And we want to make sure that it addresses our issues. All right, thank you to Chris and Rian on staff updates. If there are no other questions about that, or comments, we'll go into, really only have a few items under committee reports this month. The first is the annual report and presentation to City Council. So that kind of progress on that sort of got swallowed up in the holidays, which always happens. So Chris and Peggy and I will regroup this week on there's some data things that we need to revise, update. Obviously, the canopy study information needs to go in. The goal would be to have a report, and again, that's a short 4-page report on last fiscal year. Final draft out to the commission sometime in the next week or so, just to have a look at and send any comments back. That really can go to council at any time. Some years it's gone much earlier, but so be it. The second part is the presentation to council, and that's a little bit more comprehensive, and we'll work with Chris, and we may need some staff time on putting that together as well. It will not be as detailed in terms of the number of PowerPoint slides in the presentation last year. So Peggy and I, based on what the consensus that we sent to the commission, sort of the 3 or 4 big messaging points we want to hit before council, besides the funding requests and our annual asks for sort of things that we feel we need beyond funding. So we'll work on that. Now we're scheduled to do that on the 18th, but I won't promise you that that might not get kicked till the next council meeting, because we want to get that right. So we'll start first with the written, tying up the loose ends on the written report. The presentation to council, again, is usually a PowerPoint presentation. I don't think that went around in advance to commissioners. I cannot remember how we did it last year. We certainly can do that. And we also have some time frame as to when we can submit things to council far enough in advance ahead of their meeting. So we'll sort of figure it out and get it to them. Obviously, the initiative is on our part. I mean, council has plenty of other things to think about. I don't think they're sitting there thinking on the 18th, if we push it till the next council meeting, that there's a problem. But we're definitely, Peggy and I are definitely committed to getting that wrapped up into council. At that point, we will have, as Chris pointed out, we'll have a pretty complete draft. So we'll probably take some of the narrative out of there and digest it in some bullet points. And so we'll have more than just a map from the canopy study to share with council. And that's a big part of our messaging. So that's a January item.
Is that,
Questions or comments, Chris?
if we've already secured an agenda slot on the 18th, we need to talk real soon if we have to pull that. So let's
Correct.
talk tomorrow about that.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying, if we talk tomorrow, we may figure out that we can pull together the presentation quickly, in which case, so let's definitely, you and I, connect on that tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, so just to jump in, since council has moved, we have a council agenda meeting on Thursday. So we have to make a decision by Thursday, because of that meeting, we either pull or we keep on.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, the thing is that we want to make sure we get it right. So sitting here tonight, it may be that we'll ask to reschedule, but let's talk more about that tomorrow. The Garrett Street, 2nd Street tree nominations, which went through multiple rounds. That was to be submitted before Mike left. Part of that was to have a cover letter, which I was working on and had drafted. For a number of reasons, we just held off on sending that. Part of it was that we wanted that message, just like the message of our annual presentation, to go before a new council. And so now that we have, the council has new members sworn in and actually, people who are going to be making decisions for the several years to come are in place, we thought it would be better to send that when they're in place. So that is also on the agenda to go out. I'll connect with Chris. I don't think, there's no loose ends there. I think the packet just really required a good cover letter explaining the rationale. By the way, some of you may have noticed that ground was broken on first phase. I think it was last week or the week before, on development on Garrett. So Friendship Court in that area. So it is timely, but I don't think we'll wait. I don't think there are any questions from the forester. So I think we're working with Chris, we can get that packet before council. There's not a rush. We'll do the presentation first, but at one point we thought we'd wait until we had a new forester in place. And if that's not going to be till later in February, we'll definitely want to get the packet of nomination for those trees, since we worked very hard on negotiating that and pulling that together. So those are two upcoming items this month. Chris? Yeah.
Are they already affected by a site plan? Have you guys already had that discussion with? There's a site plan going on for all 4 phases. Are these trees that you've discussed with the developer and whoever's reviewing that site plan, and you're not going to find out like, oh, we nominate them, they get approved in July, but they're already in a site plan to be, I don't know where you guys were in that process, but that whole block's getting done.
So phase 1, so from what I saw of the map that was released, at least on Seville Tomorrow's website the other day, phase 1 does affect some of the trees on part of Garrett. Now, we nominated all the way up Garrett and then turning the corner onto Second. So there are some areas where there's no development, but not phase 1 development. So that's my understanding. But there are some places. My understanding, because there are NDS people in on these conversations over the last year or so, we've been talking about the Garrett Street trees for 2 years. And I can't remember, and Peggy can help me remember, besides Missy, there were a couple. Was it Brian who was lead on that? I cannot remember. We had this conversation, and so they knew that there would be controversial, but they knew we were going to submit the trees. My understanding is that some of those trees would be affected, but in phase 1, but we're not being taken down. Now,
I just want to make sure you've coordinated with that, and you're not going to be surprised that they've already submitted a phase 3 site plan, even if it's not ready for construction yet.
Yeah.
I just want to if you guys are coordinating with Missy, then you're probably on top of it. I just wanted to make sure.
No, let me back up. Let me back up here for a minute.
Brian?
This is part of the problem. Let me back up. Peggy, in a minute. I want to back up for a minute. Because there are so many players in this game and we're just the tree commission, NDS has attended meetings regularly. I'm sure somebody's here tonight. Maybe they're listening on the phone. I'm not sure. I cannot see them, but this conversation was had along the way before somebody from NDS. Now, I did personally sit down and talk to NDS staff and look at developers. We did look at a site plan way back, but that was a period of time ago. So all I'm saying is that we came up with the nominations. We know that there's some impact on phase 1. There's some portions of phase 1 that would be built close to the trees. But our understanding, and other old timers on the commission and Peggy, our understanding was that those trees would not be, they might be affected, their root zone might be affected, but that they were not slated to come down. Now, as a member of the tree commission, that's as much as I can claim to know. If anybody else knows more on the tree commission, as we get ready to send these nominations, Peggy maybe has some insight, but I don't know how better to answer that. Peggy, do you know?
Well, a number of years ago, I know Paul Josie and I, maybe Mark, I can't remember, looked at the site plan for phase 1 and we made comments. It was a couple of years ago, so I can't exactly, we, at that point, were concerned about the trees and were questioning about moving the buildings back maybe 10 feet. But I don't know if that happened. The problem is we've been sort of cut out of any kind of site plan review, and that's one of the issues that I think we need to talk about as a tree commission and with park staff and NDS. And so no one has notified us of any other site plans that have been submitted, as far as I know. And Chris, you're bringing up some good points, I know, but also Brian, what he has said too, we've discussed this many, many times, and there have been NDS people at the meeting, but yet they haven't pushed back against us. But, you know, I think let's the three of us talk about this tomorrow too, if we're going to talk about the report. Let's see if we can get our heads straight on this. That's my suggestion.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. I
Peggy's
wanted to
right.
make sure you guys
Yeah.
knew that until it's legally protected, it doesn't show up as a protected tree. So there could be processes going on that, and until it hits the books and it's recorded, nobody knows which one, you know, if it's conversational, it's one thing, and that's wonderful. If it's not on the books,
Yeah.
someone could say it's not on the books, like whatever. So I would,
Yeah.
it sounds like you're coordinating. We can talk more tomorrow about it and make sure it's
So,
as needed to. Yeah.
yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
you raise a very good point. I will say this, the only caution we got in the last time that I remember anybody from NDS talking about this, and I do think it was Brian, said, if you're gonna go forward with this and vote on this, sort of the caution was there would be opposition. But what that meant wasn't made clear, and there was, you know, and you know, admittedly, that was some months ago. So some time has passed and we really haven't sort of circled back to anybody to talk about this. But to Peggy's point, you know, we don't, a lot of times we don't know what's going on that affects trees. So another
Sure.
example.
Let's
We've
make
had
sure
plenty-
the neighborhood development person advises us on that topic when we do have a conversation.
And hopefully it's not too late to, but again, let's remember that it is council's prerogative to look at these and say, we're not going to put these in conservation ordinance for any number of reasons. And it could be that they don't want to affect a project that's very important to the city, that has a lot of important backers, that they just, so there could be all sorts of reasons that at the end, council will just say, yeah, it's not too late, but we don't want these trees in permanent conservation. So, and we understand that. I mean, that was the whole point. We wanted to make a statement about those trees, understanding that we obviously don't have the final decision on that, nor does NDS. So, I saw two hands. Rian's was up first, and Mark Rylander.
Yeah, so just want to give you a heads up, since we're talking about site reviews and stuff of that nature. I'm finally got contact of planner in the NDS department, that there was some holdup with certain site plans, and I'm only getting site plan review right now hitting my desk. My only question is for the committee, did Mike provide you insight to review that site plans or not? In general, site plans when it comes to tree planting, when it comes to anything with trees.
So Rian, this is Mark.
Yeah.
And there was a period of time when Paul Josie was chair where we were talking to Mike at practically every meeting and requesting copies of site plans so that the tree commission could effectively advise and back up Mike in his role as one of the NDS Public Works, Parks and Rec advisors in a site plan review. So we had this kind of role of supporting Mike, and I think that's a whole topic that we should probably review with you and Chris and others about. Is that a role we can continue to have? Is it part of the urban forester's role? A good thing to make sure that's in the job description for the forester. But whenever we got into the fine grain stuff, we found ourselves, in the thick of the discussions between city departments, where, for example, on this specific project we're talking about, the phase one, the utilities, because, in the review, they had to run onto Garrett Street the trees kind of had to go because there was only one way for the utilities to go, and we lost those trees. We had conversations saying these trees are important. Let's get ahead of it next time and make sure this doesn't happen again. And that's about where we left it. So, you know, there's a history of our being involved with site plan review and trying to support the urban forester, but we were finding certainly Mike's position was overwhelmed with this. So I'm actually kind of concerned about how we bracket that. It was almost up to the chair to decide which site plans, or to the codes committee to decide which site plans we wanted to review. And it got to be a lot of outside work, frankly, and just chasing each of them down as the city, you know, attempted to professionalize its enforcement of these things we've been talking about. So that's what I can offer as a history. We used to be more involved. We got very fine-grained on this particular project, but I don't think anyone on the tree commission was involved at the level of seeing the plans and doing utility coordination with, you know, with the tree pits and the new utility lines. That kind of thing is sort of what has to happen.
And I would agree, Mark, this was probably another topic where we have to ask some neighborhood development people and other people, what are the legalities of site plan review by commissions, you know, blah, blah, blah. So if we want to make that a topic and get some input, because that is kind of a code related thing, you might need a code adjustment to say all site plans, it's the prerogative of the commission to review, or maybe it isn't, I don't know, but.
Yeah. And the reason why I asked the question, so I could get just some history and then try to do some research, exactly what Chris mentioned about, you know, just to find out what we can and cannot. So.
Right.
So
I'm happy to help however I can.
May I say something, Brian?
Yeah.
Chris and Rian, you know, it was at least my memory of the history of this, of reviewing site plans. First of all, we were not reviewing every site plan. It was just ones that, you know, would have a significant impact on public trees. But it was confusing to us what Mike's role was. At one point, he told us he was reviewing site plans, not, you know, the tree planting plan. But then that seemed to slip. This is my memory anyway. And it was, perhaps he just had too much else to do. And at one point, NDS was sort of, was publicly letting everyone know what site plans are coming up for review, but that, that seemed to slip too. So it's been kind of a muddle. You know, it's not our intention to get involved in every single site plan. It was obviously a way to back up, give Mike some backbone. It's interesting. Mike's new job is reviewing site plans for the county he's going to be working in now. But anyway, I think that somehow this has always been a problem because there doesn't seem to be somebody in NDS that really has knowledge of trees or is a real advocate. So I think it's something we need to discuss ongoing and see if we can figure it out.
In fact,
I agree in that I've always been frustrated in not getting a clear answer of what the urban forester's role is in the review process that goes through NDS. And first we need to find out that, is there a role, an official role, and then, you know, work from there and then make sure we have an urban forester that does that role. But I'm unclear, never could get a straight answer of what the urban forester's role is in the review process.
But the quick answer is both the urban forester and I get a copy of all site plans so we can comment on them. What happens after those comments go in is probably the muddy part, but that's the short answer. We both get to see them. We have the opportunity to comment.
Okay. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. And the way Mike had explained it a couple of times to me and to a few others was that he had more say on the public trees that might be affected by the street trees than actual trees, you know, within the site itself. Now, whether that was a delineation in role and approach and code, I don't know. But we reached that point of asking to see because we felt that because we didn't know if anybody had eyes on them. Whether it was within Parks and Rec or, NDS, and who was actually advocating to the extent that they had the power and authority under whatever code, procedure, everything, to actually advocate for the trees. And there was growing frustration about that. And again, we didn't ask to see every plan. And I believe near the end of Paul's tenure, and Mark Rylander would know this, he created sort of a matrix. So like which projects would be the ones that we would say, hey, these are identified that we would really like to look at, a small group of people, not the entire commission, because one night they unfurl these plans and half of us don't read site plans. So it's a waste of time. But so that was the frustration. And that was reported back to us as, with past leadership of the department, you have no authority over site plans, no advice consent rule, which we understand. And we don't want, we have plenty to do. In fact, we have too much to do. We don't really, this tree commission doesn't want to have to look at site plans, but we ended up sort of backing into that role because we felt it wasn't being done. So I think you've heard enough. That's all the background. I think we can put our heads together and figure out how to have a better process so that the kind of question that Chris, you raised at the beginning of my conversation about Garrett and Second Street doesn't get an answer because there wasn't really a good ongoing process. Peggy, did you want to say? If not, I see Tim's hand.
I think I've said, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
Mark and summed it
Tim?
up really well.
Tim, your hand was up.
Sure, yeah, and I think Jeff might have had his hand up before me, but I was just gonna say, I think the zoning review and update is a good opportunity to look at who the identified reviewers are for the site plan conferences, including, more of like a regulatory participant, and maybe tree commission has an advisory role in that. But, actually getting the plans transmitted to a representative of the tree commission, like Chris and Mike used to, as city staff, I think we could maybe try to raise that question and see if that's feasible and appropriate. I also think there's a different level of interplay that happens that's not just based on planners or urban foresters or landscape architects who should be trained to look at this and who should be really stewarding these issues for us. I think I understand from some of these projects we've brought up tonight that it's really a different department, somebody from a different angle is saying, look, we actually can't have trees around Apex because that's a fire hazard. Or we can't replace the willow oaks along Code with canopy trees, so we need to have shrubs. We're just not going to replace those canopy trees because it's a building and code issue. I think when we can really start to identify where those decisions are being made, I think there needs to be either education or advocacy or some kind of guidance to say, look, this is a citywide priority to protect the mature canopy trees that we have and to plant more canopy trees, whether that's in conjunction with redevelopment, new development, public rights of ways, public parks. I think until that becomes like a real deeply rooted value across different departments and across different divisions, we really are going to keep running into that problem of everybody did the right thing, and then at the last minute, somebody with a lot of power, whether it's administering the fire code or the building code, which are awesome things, is coming in and resulting in massive losses to our urban forests. So I don't know what my point is there, but I just think about maybe a need for like an intersectional emphasis on this is a critically important topic, like some of the other things that get a little bit more attention in the local media.
And I think those are fantastic comments, and I just want to piggyback on those because I think it is not necessarily our responsibility as a tree commission to review those plans. Like there are other people doing that, other people with expertise. There are team members as part of those design teams that need to be reviewing those and avoiding trees with utilities and et cetera. But part of our responsibility is to create value for those trees so it becomes an important part of the metric that they're using to evaluate those decisions. And they're like, that's a 50K decision we have to make. Are we going to take out that tree, or are we going to move that utility line and stick it in the street? And there's added costs because there's extra manhole covers, et cetera. But if we don't do that, the project is hit with, 150K worth of costs that have to go into a tree fund. That's where I think we have a lot of value, is we go out and we say with an urban forester, this tree is really important. Either it's a beautiful specimen, as we've noted, I think in other projects, it has historic value because of its location along a corridor, or it's part of a historic corridor, or it's part of an avenue. And then we say, this has value. Here is that value. Now incorporate that into your decision-making process as a developer and as a city. So it's not up to us to like take those plans and look at them and say, well, if you could shift the utilities over to here, you could save this tree. That's not our responsibility. That's somebody else's, but we put value on it and say, here's a value, you figure it out.
And to both of your points, I think the frustration comes from not fully understanding, and also, I would appreciate it if there's already enough on the urban forester's plate, and or that person doesn't really have a lot of authority outside of his or her department. Then who within NDS is, I get your point about putting value, but you also want a point person, somebody you can rely on within the organization who's like, I keep my eye on this, right? I keep my eye on this, and also I understand there's value to this. And so our frustration has been, if we don't sense there's anybody doing that, then we'll just send a few site plans our way, the ones where they can do the most damage, and we'll try to have some comments. But again, we don't want to be in that business. We're not, well, I won't speak for all of you, but I'm not an expert. I don't want to look at those things. And we also have plenty of other things to do. So it's by default that we find ourselves in this place. And it's been frustrating, and I really hope we can find a way out of this, working with staff and new leadership to say, how can we do this better, that we're not looking to take over anybody's job and we're not looking to step on anybody's role here. We just want to make sure that somebody's paying attention to this, right? That's what it boils down to. I did see Jody and then Chris. Jody?
So I just want to make a point that we tried this before. I don't know if it was a year ago, 2 years ago, I forget when, by talking to NDS and asking them about the process that they went through, because there are a lot of different issues involved at the site plan level, and generally safety, whether it's fire department or police, trump most other considerations. But there are a lot of issues involved, and trees often in the past have not garnered a lot of power in those decisions. But there's new leadership in NDS now, and I'm very impressed with the new director, and I think it would be good for us to invite him to a meeting to discuss this with them, to emphasize the importance of trees, and ask them to within his staff, and as they consider all the issues with a site plan, to not just assume that trees are the least needed, the least valuable in that equation.
Thanks.
Good point.
Chris?
Just real quickly, I think the true power of making any of this work is if it's not in the code, it's not in the code. Doesn't matter who says what about it. If it's not in the code, they just go, case dismissed. So I think if there's an exercise to be had, which I'm happy to help with, or the urban forester and all that with NDS, is what can we do with the code? Because that is the authority, is the code effectively.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to discuss that at a later date.
Oh, we have been chomping at the bit for years to put our comments in. We can't wait for the code rewrite process, because it addresses a lot of what we've discussed here tonight, right? I mean, these are all valid points. They all go together. By the way, I'm glad we have a transcript of this meeting, because there's a lot of good stuff that's been said. And I really, we'll have minutes, but actually I think the transcript, the entire transcript might be helpful because when we put together planning for the next year or so, we've discussed a lot of the interrelated issues, how to deal with this. I think we've probably, if everybody feels that we've had a good conversation about this for now, at least. Peggy has just a quick update on Relive Seville, and then we get to my favorite part of the meeting.
Yeah, Christmas came and then, I'm sorry here, somebody's trying, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Somebody from Texas. This is very difficult to talk with the phone. Somebody from Texas is trying to call me. Who in the world? Sorry, Brian. Feel like I'm talking to a blank sheet here. Anyway, on release, of course, we haven't done much over Christmas. But one exciting thing happened. One thing we wanted to do, part of our goals is to introduce the teenagers, to get them involved in the importance of trees and nature, is to introduce them to jobs in the green industry. And that's an event we want to hold around Arbor Day or Earth Day. And Jacqueline came up with a great suggestion that why don't we talk to the principal at CHS, Eric Zari, and perhaps do it there because we'd have a captive audience of all the teenagers in the city. Also we are actually consulting with the environmental science teacher there anyway. And he finally got back to me and said that he thinks it's a great idea. And so that's something we're going to be planning for this spring. And we'll also work with the Parks Department on that. But anyway, so that other than that, I don't have any other update. But I think this will be a fun project for us to do.
Thanks, that's great. More education,
Yes, more education.
creating advocates, one step at a
Yep.
time. Jacqueline, comment?
Oh, may I just add, we'd love to tap the tree commission's thoughts, ideas on possible industry contacts for this event. We've been kind of drumming up Peggy, right, as sort of a brainstorming list, but if you all, maybe we could report back with a list, Peggy, next meeting of who we're thinking of trying to get on site at CHS to engage the teens. And we'd love any feedback from you all. Many minds
Yes,
would help.
I
So
agree. If you have any suggestions, I think we'll target. We haven't talked to again, we got to talk. There are two teachers that we need to talk to. One, the environmental science teacher, and the other that does the master gardening there. And so we will be talking to them soon if the schools ever start up again. But probably we want to target 10 vendors, 10 to 15. And I have started a list, but if anybody has suggestions, and it's not just, it could be, climate change is going to be a big issue with teenagers too. So it's, green industry, which includes kind of energy and that sort of thing. So we'll get back to you next meeting.
Great. Thank you. Anything more? Any comments or questions? All right, so as you know, it is January, and January is when we elect new leadership for the commission. So as I am leaving the commission, it's certain that there will be a new chair. So what we'll do first is start with nominations for chair, and then we'll take nominations for vice chair, and usually we can just do this as a slate. So I would like to begin.
Could you remind us who else is leaving the commission?
Oh, thank you. Excellent point. Okay, so in 2022, as of March 2022, I step off because I'm term limited. And then two members are up for renewal. So that process will begin soon with the city clerk sending out applications or inviting applications. And city council should be making a decision. Usually it's a quarterly thing. So by the end of this quarter. So I'm stepping off. Anson, who's not here with us, and Tim, their terms expire, but they're eligible for renewal. I just want to point out, because this confuses people, if you are a current member and eligible for another term, you still need to submit that one-page application, which is available once it's posted. And usually the city sends out a blast saying the following boards and commissions have openings. So be on the lookout for that. But that means, Tim, when you reapply, you need to actually reapply for another term. And we know you're not going anywhere. We know you're staying with us for another 3 years. So Peggy and I are committed to hounding you to get that application in. So that's March. And then Mark Zollenhofer is the only person, but he's eligible in November. His term ends because he was filling an uncompleted term, unexpired term. So those are the only people who are either going off or might go off the commission this year. I guess really what it means is for the people present tonight, it's Tim and Mark who I believe are re-upping or applying to re-up, so would be here. Does that answer for you?
Yes, thank you.
And also on that note, thank you for reminding me, this process happens quicker than we think. So in terms of the applications are solicited, and then I think sometime by March 1st, they close it and then they send it to us, and we'll check with staff what the timing is. They send us those who've applied and we make recommendations, and then council votes. And again, since these terms expire 3/31, I'm assuming that council would be voting pretty close to that date, so that as of April 1st, new members will join. So when we know a little bit more about the schedule, we'll let you know. You should be thinking, and we always say this, you should be thinking about people you know as well, who you think would be good members of the commission. We invite a range of skill sets. We really want to increase diversity of all types. So now is the time to think, and when we can provide you the website and all that, the link to push people in that direction to apply. We found that it takes some effort, although since we've been on Zoom, we've had more applications than in the past. So, but it's still good if you know of anybody who you think would be a good member. So that's something else to think about. All right, elections, nominations. I'd like to begin by nominating Peggy Vanieri for chair of the Tree Commission. We don't make speeches, but I just want to say that we all know her commitment to trees, and it's been my honor and privilege to work with her, and so I have full faith, and I'd like to nominate her. Is there a second?
Second.
I see multiple seconds. We'll take, Jody's was the loudest, so we'll just take it by that. Are there other nominations for the position of chair of the Tree Commission? I see no hands raised. I see no other nominations. Let's just make this clean and let's go to nominations for vice chair.
I'd like to make a nomination.
Maggie?
Can you hear me? Yeah, I'd like to
Yes.
nominate Jeff Hayden for vice chair.
Is there a second to that nomination?
I second. This is Mark Rylander.
Okay, we heard Mark's voice, so we'll just go with Mark Rylander. We saw several. We haven't asked these people yet whether they would accept if elected. Are there any other nominations for vice chair of the Tree Commission? All right, I see no other hands up and no one is. We can probably defer the speeches unless either candidate wants to make a speech. Otherwise, I would move by acclamation. And a show of hands would be helpful, but vote by acclamation. The slate is for the coming year, Peggy Van Aries as chair and Jeff Aiden as vice chair. In favor?
Aye.
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 We see
Looking forward to
hands. And those who aren't there, we heard ayes. So that's by acclamation. Peggy or Jeff, do you want to say anything before we take public comment?
Public comment. Well, thank you, Brian. I'm feeling a little bit like, I'm not going to pronounce his name correctly, but you know, the Duke basketball coach is stepping down, Mike Krzyzewski. I feel a little
Coach
bit
K.
like I'm following in his footsteps with having Brian for the last year and then Paul for a number of years before that. It's going to be a daunting task. And also listening to everything tonight that all of you talked about we need to be doing. I'm sort of sinking into my chair here and thinking, Jeff, how are we going to do this all? But thank you very much for your confidence. And, you know, it's fun. I've had a great time. Brian and I have had a great relationship. It's really been fun doing it. And Brian, at the beginning of the year, said, I think I'm going to be on Zoom for a year. And I said, oh, no. But he did. So let's hope I'm not on Zoom. Jeff and I and all of you are not on Zoom for another year. Thank you.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm very much looking forward to it and digging in more and getting lots of things done in this next year. I think it's very exciting, and hopefully meeting in person too.
Yeah.
And Peggy, just to correct a little bit of what you said, you know, you and I have been doing this for 2 years. I know it feels like a year some days it feels like 100 years, but
Oh, that's right.
but it actually, yes, it was a quick 2 years. And I think we'll go down in the annals of the Tree Commission as not being chair and vice chair, but being virtual chair and virtual vice chair. Because we only ever, at least I only ever got to chair 2 meetings face to face with you nice people. Otherwise, it's been here. So no, I think the commission will be in very good hands, and I thank you both for agreeing to serve. We do have public comment. So if our staff, if communications, is there anybody who is listening in or otherwise joining the meeting that wants from the public?
The only hand we have raised is Rory. I'm gonna allow him to talk.
Good evening, Tree Commission. Thanks for the opportunity to comment tonight. Longtime listener, first time commenter. I'm a resident of Water Street. First off, I'd like to thank Rian for taking my comment about donations seriously. I look forward to seeing that button on the website. I appreciated the advice about how to donate by check, but to be completely honest, I didn't know people still use checkbooks. So I look forward to making a donation once that's up there and pushing out the message. I'm coming tonight. I know you guys had a packed agenda, but I was hoping to hear a little bit from you guys on the storm this week and the effect that's had on trees and what we can do about it. You know, I think probably the larger trees that went down in the more wooded areas probably got a little bit more attention, taking down power lines and such with it. But the effect on a lot of our very young trees seemed real bad. I don't know if you all have had a chance to go down West Main, but the elms in front of the flats are in really bad shape. It looked like almost every one of those, is severely damaged, and I don't know if those are recoverable. I haven't been down there yet, but I've heard the new trees on East Water Street on the shared use path that we put in a couple of years ago have also been severely damaged by the storm. So I guess first off, I was wondering if there were any plans to repair them or do whatever is needs to be done to help them recuperate. And second of all, I thought maybe a useful thing to do would be to create messaging. If this sort of thing is avoidable, and it seems to me, a layman, naively, that for the really big trees, there's not too much you can do, but for these little ones, if you just shook some snow off or brushed it off with a broom, a lot of this damage would have been avoidable. And so perhaps for future snow events, we create some messaging to teach lay members of the public, while they're out there shoveling, or for people like me in apartments who have no shoveling to do, but want to help out, to tell them how to go out and help save these trees before the damage happens. And perhaps we can make that part of our normal pre-storm messaging that the city can push out as it offers that advice. But thanks again for the opportunity to comment. And I hope you all have a great night and stay warm.
Thank you. That's an excellent point. I think going back, and I'll turn this back quickly to staff, but I think at the beginning of the meeting, there was a sense that you all, maybe it was Dana was talking about beginning to assess the damage. Is that correct? Can you either Rian or Chris speak to that? Will there be sort of an overall assessment and kind of a report, or at least a listing of the damage?
Yes, so tomorrow, that's the first time that I could pull staff. I can pull staff away from the snowing, plowing and stuff of that nature, is to go around and to each park and start assessing. I hope to get some type of report done by the end of the week. I'm hoping the next snow that's supposed to be coming on Thursday does not interfere with that. So my goal is to have some form of report, but if not, it will be due to the next snow that's coming our way on Thursday.
Rian, is there something we need to ask for from Public Works, who often goes and clears trees on roads that wouldn't necessarily come through our department, or the fire department,
Yes, I can definitely request that from Public Works as well.
It would be, for this particular event, it would be good. We know there are a lot of other priorities and things pressing, but to have sort of a final documentation at some point, because it sounds like we have all seen it, but even talking right now, I've got reports from Monticello and the devastation on the Monticello Trail and Kemper Park. And so, I mean, more and more is coming in, and obviously it's on people's minds, members of the public. To go back to Rory's comments, I mean, we do tell people that they have to, if they own a house and all that, they're required to shovel and clear their sidewalks and all that, but it would be kind of nice in that mailing, in the first utility mailing in the winter, just a reminder, if it just got a few people to do that, to take a little ownership of the tree in front of their house, we probably wouldn't have lost as many. So I think it's an excellent point. Jody?
I also drove down West Main this morning and was struck by just the almost total devastation of the trees in front of the flats, and how that compared to the other trees on Main Street. And I was wondering, is that an issue of their age, or is it an issue of the species? I'm just hoping that as the assessments are done and the survey is done of all the tree damage, that if there's something we can learn from this in regard to what trees should be on our planning list, and what trees should not, hopefully we can make some changes as a result of this. But it was just, I was just struck by how almost every one of those trees were damaged in front of the flats, and yet you go to the Hampton Inn next door and nothing. They look great. Just an observation.
Yeah, no, that's a great observation. Tim just threw up his hand. I don't know what's the comment.
Yeah, just to echo the same thing. I walked on West Main during the 4 o'clock hour before logging on, and it was shocking to see that, as Jody said, every single one of those were either damaged or appear to be dead. So I think in response to Rory's comments, I don't know so much about recuperation. Maybe it's more about replacement. I think looking at trees in the public right of way or in public parks is a little bit different than looking at some of these commercial streetscapes where if they've got an approved site plan and it's showing canopy trees, if those trees, you know, they need to be there basically to be in compliance with site plan. So I don't quite know the ins and outs of how NDS works, but I think as part of the assessment, NDS and zoning should be made aware of commercial properties that have lost canopy trees and in a reasonable way, work with the property owners to alert them that they need to replace those canopy trees to be in compliance with approved site plans.
And I might even mention just something on NBC 29 or something that says, hey, if you're walking by, this is the appropriate way to de-snow a tree without breaking the poor thing. Because I had that issue out in my Belmont neighborhood. I'm like, should I be hitting this with a shovel? Because they're higher up trees, the evergreens. Am I doing more damage than good? So maybe just a general awareness. Hey, if you're walking by, you know, pick up the litter, shake the tree. And, you know, a lot of people could do that as well, just as they're walking, if they know how to do it right.
Yeah. All right. I presume that was the totality of public comment. That was a very good comment. We appreciate it. And now we have the very last thing, items, announcements not on the agenda. And I can't imagine there's anything we haven't discussed. And it's 7 minutes after 7, surprisingly. Mark Z.
The only thing that I want to mention is about the new development at by the university at the corner of Emmett Street and Ivy. There are 14 acres there that are currently beginning site work. And I think I may have mentioned it at the last meeting, but anyway, the city has the responsibility for the sidewalks and right-of-way along the northern direction of Emmett from University all the way up to Arlington. And there's concern that the city budget doesn't address enough monies to landscape and treescape that corridor in a way that's complementary to what the university is doing on Ivy Road. And so there has been some information that CATS has learned that has been, I think, passed on to the tree commission by letter, but just recently maybe. But anyway, I think our next meeting, we should have that as an agenda item to see if the tree commission can encourage conversation with the city authorities to find out what the city's plans are for that corridor.
And thank you very much for raising that, because I'd forgotten. We did get a letter, an email from Robin, middle of the afternoon. So I encourage you to read that, because it seems as though even before the next meeting, there's an opportunity at least to reach out to folks. Because that would be a missed opportunity to, I mean, it's an entry corridor. It's the way, right? I mean, especially the university, but it's an entry corridor that's going to be used more and more by people in the community going to events there. So, so we should definitely follow up on that. Thank you, Mark, for raising that. Any other items?
Helpful if it shows up in the minutes.
Yes, thank you. Any other items or announcements? We're at 10 past the hour. I see none. So the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for your time. Stay safe, stay warm.
Hi, stay.
Brian,
Bye.
thank you for your tenure. We'll have time to celebrate your
Yes, thank you, Brian.
chairship later.
I'm not going anywhere.
Okay, that's good. We'll see you next time.
You have me for 2 more months. But next month,
Good.
next month, you're not going to hear very much from me. I'm just going to sit back. You know, someone else can do the talking. All right, thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye now.